why did this new movie, The Wild Robot, really impact so many people? And I think it definitely almost brought me to tears when I first watched it. I didn't have the benefit or the pleasure of watching it in theaters like I would have liked. Hopefully I'll catch Ward or hear him in theaters, we'll see. But it still was super emotional, and I think it will be next time I watch it, even though I know what's going on. And I didn't read the book, and I actually don't know how thoroughly based it is on the book, so I'll probably have to read it soon, just as some light reading. But my question is, like, what really made this such a wonderfully emotional movie, and one that so many people enjoy to such a magnitude that it's doing really well in box offices, and that it is really blowing up on the internet and amongst subcultures. So let's take a little bit of a look at this, and I think I do have the answer. So this is a rule that I've looked at a little bit before. Jed Hearn talks about this. If you don't know, real quick, I'm interrupting myself. If you don't know, I'm a science fiction and fantasy writer. That is kind of my trade, the thing I would love to make my own professional career, and that I am continuing to delve into trying to do. And this is my video series where I analyze books and movies in a way that allows for both readers, or viewers in this case, to benefit from them and see the storytelling practices and tips in a way that allows them to enjoy the movies more for the art that went into building such stable plots and character arcs, while at the same time benefiting creators, whether you're an animator, you're working on your next short film or something like that, or you are like me. I do like to make short films and stuff. I'm on YouTube too, but also like writing books and telling stories and trying to make these stories as impactful as possible. I want to look at one thing, going to the root of it, and that is what made these points in the movie. Sorry if I'm spoiling this. Don't watch this video if you haven't watched the movie, sorry. But, I mean, you can if you want, but I'll spoil some of the emotional impacts. I'll try to be non-spoilery, but if you've watched the movie, you know the places in the narrative that I'm talking about, these moments where there's so much emotional buildup, and your heart, while you're watching it, you're just sitting there, you're like, I don't want to cry, I'm in front of people, but at the same time, you're like, I want to cry because this is really sad, and it's something that a lot of books struggle to do, and a lot of movies have nowhere near the same impact as. But I do think I figured out what this thing is, and this is a rule that I try to use nowadays in almost all of my fiction, and that is the rule of taking whatever story you have, and that climax and the darkest point for the character, and making that 20% worse. I call this the 20% rule. This is something that Brandon Sanderson and Jed Hearn talk about, where they're like, oh, what if I make this worse? I think Dan Wells as well, making the story a little bit worse. In my case, I try to do about 20%, like, oh, the character died. That's sad. How can I make it 20% plus or more than 20% worse for the character? And that is by, oh, it's so bad if they are actually the ones that kill their best friend. Sorry, a little bit of spoilers for one of my own books, but, you know, building these things to make it worse. You know, you are the person who, it's kind of like, if you can look at a story and make it worse, you can make the narrative, I mean, don't always do this, obviously, but what I'm saying is, like, if you're able to do this on stories in a very tactical way, you can make the emotional payoff, like, that much more impactful. Like, I think for me, it took a story that I was meh about. I wrote a first draft of technically it was a novella, I called it a novel, it wasn't very good, and I didn't publish it. And it's become one of my favorite novels now because I use this rule and use the climax of that novella as kind of the, I had to rewrite it, of course, as kind of the catalyst for my favorite book now, which is Crown of Tears. Sign up to the email list if you want to hear updates, maybe get some chapters from it, blah, blah, blah. But that all resulted from using this 20% rule, where I take this story and I make it worse for the characters. And you can do this in all sorts of ways. You know, you wake up, you're a clone. This is kind of one of my most recent projects I did with my new company. It didn't really work. It was an interactive fiction. We'll have a free version of the first like 20 to 30,000 words over on our website. So check that out in the link in the description. Just sign up to the email list and I will let you know when we give that out. It's about an hour of playtime, really fun. Concept is, as I'm going to tell you, you know, you wake up and you are a clone. Maybe you're in you're in a cryogenic pod. You wake up, you're like, who am I? I'm this person, I don't have any memory of who I was, I have amnesia, as I just said, and then as you go up throughout the story, you're learning more and more about what your character was, and the idea is like, when I was writing it, how could I make this even worse for the character? And I think that led to a really, really fun, at least for me, payoff in the end of that first chapter of the video game, which is about like an hour of playtime, 30 minutes to an hour, sorry, of playtime, that free version that we're going to be giving away in the email list is. And it's this idea of just make the story worse emotionally for the characters. When Rosm, the robot in this wonderful movie, which I'm very excited, I guess this is kind of the review for it. 5 stars for sure. One of the best movies of 2023. It's 2024. When she is bound contractually with her, always completes an objective, I think is what she says. When she has that going on, you're like, okay, she's clearly developing some emotional resonance with Brightbill. Brightbill, I think it's Brightbill, yeah. As she goes along, becoming kind of a mother robot, which is really, really cool. I call it a Hubot concept, where it's like, rather than having the human descending into cyborgness and like that question of asking, when does a man become a monster or a robot or non-human? This is this subversion, kind of the Hubot concept is what I call it, and I'm going to write some books on this in the future. But it's the idea of, when does a robot become human? And I don't think it really is possible. So the idea is like that struggle of the balancing act of, I'm still a robot, but I still have these interesting emotions, and this story does it so well that you are tearing up as you watch the movie, because we're sending Brightbill off. That is a very, very difficult decision for Rosm. She's like, okay, I'm going to leave after this happens. I might not ever see you again. And then stays, defying the objectives. It just becomes, some of those scenes are the best I've ever watched. And if you have not watched the movie, please go watch it. It is so, so good. And I think it's all because it uses that 20% rule. So congratulations to DreamWorks for making that movie. Congratulations to the author. I'm sorry I don't know your name. I'm sorry I haven't read your book. But this is a wonderful principle, and I'd love to hear you guys' concepts. A wonderful principle, wonderful story, sorry. But the principle, I think, was used very well in this, and I don't know if it was intentional, but I hope that you took something out of this as a viewer if you are not a creator, and as a creator if you are a creator. So thank you. Please let me know what you think of this principle and how you've used it, and how it could be used to improve plots and stories in the future, and in the popular culture where that's all around us today, in the comments. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful 20% less terrible day than usual. Terrible, that sounds really depressing, but yeah, blessings.